Shavua Tov. Today's daf is Memches. We'll start on Mem Zayin Amid Beis, about 7 lines before the end of the Amud. Minani Milu. The Gemara wants to know what's the source for the fact that a Kohen and a Nazir, even though they're enjoined from being mitame to any of their krovim, but nevertheless they're allowed to be mitame to mes mitzvah and maybe even obligated to do so. Tana Rabbana, we learned in a brisa, and now we're in Parshas Emor, where we learn about the laws of a Kohen. And it says, I'll call nafshos meis lo yovo. And this is a reference to the Kohen Gadol, as opposed to a Kohen Hedjot, who's matami to his 7 close relatives when they die. A Kohen Gadol, it says, I'll call nafshos meis lo yovo. When it says nafshos mes, so what is it referring to? What is the Isur to be mitame referring to? Iber chokim. If we're talking about those who are not related to him, then kal v'chomer huma kohen hedjot shu mitame lekrovim eina mitame lechokim kohen gadol sheina mitame lekrovim eino din sheina mitame lechokim. We know that a Kohen Hedjot is not mitame l'rechokim. How much more so a Kohen Gadol is not mitame l'rechokim, because Kohen Hedjot is mitame to his 7 krovim, and a Kohen Gadol is not mitame to any of his krovim. And how much more so he cannot be mitame to rechokim. Now, I'm not sure if this is really a kal v'chomer in the technical sense of it. It might be just what we call a gili milsa, that obviously if a Kohen Gadol cannot be mitame to his krovim, he certainly can't be mitame to his rechokim. But you might ask the following question: so why does the Gemara have to invoke an analogy to Kohen Hedjot? I mean, mimakom shebasa, you don't have to stretch your arm out to Kohen Hedjot to compare Kohen Gadol to Kohen Hedjot. Just point out that a Kohen Gadol is not mitame to his krovim, is certainly a din shem mitame l'rechokim. But it would seem from this Gemara that there's a havamina that it would make more sense to be lenient for a Kohen Gadol in this case to be mitame to rechokim and not to krovim. And the reason for that is, and this I'm basing myself on something I heard many years ago from my Rebbe, Rav Soloveitchik used to always say that a Kohen Gadol has the bechina of simcha. He's always omed lifnei Hashem. It's almost as if halachically he's always in the Azara, where the Shechina is. And Rav Soloveitchik had various proofs for that. Now, Velus and his Askus B'mes is antithetical to Simcha and Shechina. They're polar opposites. And certainly in the case of Krovim, if he gets involved in the burial of his Krovim, that's going to be so antithetical to his status of Shechina and Simcha. But maybe in the case of Rechokim, it's just for him more of an external mechanical act of Kvura, and it's not antithetical to his Kedushas Kahuna as a Kohen Gadol who's Omed Lifnei Hashem Tamid. But for that, therefore, I need some sort of a mechanism by which I can determine that even in the case of Rechokim, he's not allowed to be mitame himself. And that's what we're going to learn from a comparison to Kohen Hedjot, because the Kohen Hedjot is mitame lekrovim and not lerechokim, and a Kohen Gadol certainly, therefore, cannot be mitame lerechokim. So we see that even tumah lerechokim is antithetical to kedushas kahuna. Ella, therefore, the Gemara says that when it says in the pasuk, "I'll call nafshos mes lo yovo," is bikrovim akosim medaber, and we now know that even in the case of krovim, where there might be more of a matir, because the Kohen Gadol as a karov is specifically responsible for the kvura, the burial of his close relatives, and yet the Torah says, "I'll call nafshos meis lo yovo." But then the rest of the pasuk seems to be superfluous, because the pasuk says, "Ve'al kol nefasha nafshos meis lo yavo li'avu le'imo lo yitame." So what's the point of the Torah adding la'aviv when it says already in the pasuk that I'll call nafshos hames lo yavo? And the Gemara says that the word li'aviv is a mute. Li'aviv hu di'edo mitame, ha-mitame hu lemes mitzvah. That there is some case out there where the Kohen Gadol is allowed to be mitame lemes, and that's going to be the case of mes mitzvah. Now, exactly what is a mes mitzvah? I mean, that's a complicated sugya. We'll see if we can get a little bit of an insight into that. So now we begin Daf Mem Ches, which is today's Daf. The pasuk said not only li'aviv, but also said li'imo. And here we're going to introduce a drasha of Rebbe, which is called Gzeira Shava, to justify the extra word li'imo. The Rebbe design. Rebbe Omer, Gabi Nazir. Now we're jumping from Parshas Emor in Kohen Gadol, fast forwarding to Parshas Naso in Nazir, and there are very striking similarities, because in the case of Nazir, the Torah again says Al nefesh meis lo yavo, but then it goes into detail li aviv uli imo li achiv la choso lo yitam elem b'mosim. So why do I need these extra words, these extra relatives that are specified here? Furthermore, Rebbe is bothered by the word b'mosam. It could have just easily have said al nefesh meis lo yavo v'lo yitami lahem. The pasuk in the Reish already mentions that we're talking about a nefesh meis, so why did it have to add the word b'mosam? And Rebbe answers, b'mosam eino mitame. Once again, the extra word b'mosam is a mute. Aval mitamehu linigam ulezivasam. A Nazir is enjoined from contracting tumas mes. He is not enjoined from coming in contact with a mitzora or a zava or a zav, which would transfer to him a contamination of tzoras and zav, but those aren't tumas mes. And the Torah adds the word here in terms of the Isser of a Nazir to be done, b'mosam, and it's telling you b'mosam means tumas mes. That's what the word b'mosam is telling me. But there are other categories of tumah which Rebbe derives from this word b'mosam, like mitzor and zav, which are not enjoyed, where the Kohen is not enjoyed, the Nazir, is not enjoyed from contracting tumah. The Brisa continues. How do we know that even with regard to Kohen Gadol, the prohibition of tumah is limited to tumas mes and does not extend to include zav and mitzora? Amarta lo yomar imo b'Kohen Gadol. Why did the Torah in the parsha of Emor mention imo? Aviv, we said, was to be matir mes mitzvah, but why imo? She'ein Talmud lomar. I'll prove to you that the word imo is completely redundant. Sharei kal v'chomer hu. Now, this kal v'chomer that we're about to learn is a little bit more complicated than the previous kal v'chomer that we saw on Mem Zayin or Mid Beis, and I'm not exactly sure why the Bryce of Rebbe had to go into such nuances here to create this Kal V'chomer. Hare Kal V'chomer hu. Uma im b'makom shekoin hejot mitame. Is the koin hejot is mitame even li achiv me aviv. So now the koin hejot is allowed to be mitame to his half brother. But what kind of a half brother? I feel like we're back in Masechet Yomi for a change of pace. It's only his paternal half brother. He is not mitame, however, to his maternal half brother. Now we get to Kohen Gadol. By comparison, by contrast, ein Kohen Gadol mitame li aviv. If a Kohen Gadol is not mitame even to his father, as is explicitly mentioned in the pasuk, how much more so to his half brother, who's only related to him through his father, and that's called achiv me'aviv. So in the case of a Kohen Gadol, as opposed to a Kohen Hejot, he cannot be mitame li aviv, and how much more so to achiv me'aviv, whose relationship only goes through the father. What happens if he has a maternal brother? The Kohen Hejot himself cannot bury his own brother. He's enjoined from being mitame to achiv me imo. Why? Because in the case of imo, there's a kind of a lower relationship, if you will, that goes through the mother. And this we see from the laws of Yerusha. And for example, the Bnei Yaakov, when they present themselves to Yosef, they say, Shnei Masar Anachnu Achim Bnei Avinu. We are brothers because we share the same father. And from this, we derive the conclusion that, this in Yivamis in Zayin of Beis, that Achim min ha'av kruyim Achim v'lo Achim min ha'em. This is also derived from the parsha of Yibum, where the Torah says Ki yesh v'Achim yachdav, and it's only Achim min ha'av, not Achim min ha'em. There's no din Yibum to Achim min ha'em. So Kohen Hejot is not mitame to achiv me'imo. Is no din, how much more so shein Kohen Gadol mitame li'imo. Right, the whole relationship of achiv me'imo is through the mother, and that relationship is not spread out. It doesn't expand to include achiv me'imo. So we see that imo is sort of like, in a certain sense, one step further removed, and even in Kohen Hejot, imo is not able to connect him to achiv me'imo. And now we get to the case of Kohen Gadol, is eino din she'ein Kohen Gadol mitame li'imo. Now again, I don't know exactly why the Gemara needs this complicated Kal V'chomer. I mean, we know that a Kohen Gadol is not mitame to aviv, he's not mitame to imo. I don't know. It says I'll call nefesh nafshos meis lo yava. I'm not sure why the Gemara needs this Kal V'chomer. Im zachisa. Now that we were zochet to learn this din that a Kohen Gadol is not allowed to be mitame li'imo, may a din based on this Kal V'chomer, because Kohen Hejot is not mitame achiv me'imo, and certainly a Kohen Gadol is not mitame li'imo, because achiv me'imo is relationship through imo, and a Kohen Gadol is one step more chomer than a Kohen Hejot, is then matame lomer imo. Why did the pasuk have to add imo? And the Gemara answers, but Kohen Gadol mufna. This is going to give us the possibility of Gzeres Shav, because Gzeres Shav has to be at least half mufna. Lahakish v'lodon emenu gzeira shava. Shenemar imo bin Nazir. Right, the word imo appears in the parsha of Nazir, and nemar imo b'kohen gadol aviv lo yitama. And we said that the word imo is superfluous; it's mufna, meaning we derived already for kama chomer that a kohen gadol is not allowed to be mitami le'imo. Is ma imo amr bin Nazir bin mosam enu mitami avol mitami bin nigam b'zivasam. Again, this is all Rebbe. Is af imo amr kohen gadol bin mosam enu mitami avol mitami lenigam b'zivasam. So there's no isa tumah to kohen gadol in the cases of tumas ziva and tsaras, and this is derived from a gzeir shava and the redundant word imo that takes us back to Nazir. And again, when we take it back to Nazir, we go back to the extra word b'mosam, from which Rebbe derives the conclusion mitami b'nigyasam b'nigam b'zivasam. The Gemara says ashkechan kohen gadol. We have derived from the extra wordly aviv in the parsha and emor of kohen gadol that a kohen gadol is mitame to a mes mitzvah. And now the Gemara is asking, Nazir minolan. How do we know that a Nazir is permitted to be mitame to a mes mitzvah? And you and I would have said that it's based on a kal v'chomer. If kohen gadol whose kedusha is that much greater than that of a Nazir, because a kohen gadol will go lifnai v'lifnim, he does the avoda, then how much? And yet he's permitted to be mitami for a mes mitzvah. How much more so in the case of a Nazir? But the Gemara is still vacillating as it did early on Daf Mem Zayin. Maybe a Nazir has a kedusha that's even greater than that of a kohen gadol, although the kohen gadol is a kedushas olam and a Nazir is only kedusha l'shah. But nevertheless, a Nazir, if he's metame, he brings karbanos, which we don't find by a kohen gadol. So there are elements of chumrah in Nazir above and beyond kohen gadol. So maybe a Nazir is not permitted to be metame l'mes mitzvah. The Sanya we learned in the Brisa, Kol Yemei, he's Haziro Lashem Al Nefesh Meis Lo Yavo. We have to emphasize the word mes, and we have to emphasize the word nefesh mes. Shomei ani afilu nefesh behema b'mashma. I might think that a Nazir is enjoyed from common contact with an avela. And why is that? Because even a behema is called nefesh. Like 2 points for animals here, right? Kinyan shenemar we find. At the end of Parshas Emor, it says makin nefesh behema. So it says that a behema has a nefesh. The Ramban in his Pirush al Torah makes a big deal about this. In any event, Talmud Lomar al nefesh meis lo yavo. It doesn't just say the word nefesh. If it just said the word nefesh, that would include a behema. But nowhere in the Torah is a behema called nefesh hames. It's called nefesh, but not nefesh hames. And here, in the case of Nazir, the Torah says al nefesh mes lo yavo, and that's been nefesh adam hakosu medaber. Only an adam is called nefesh hames, and therefore a Nazir is permitted to be metame to the carcass of a dead animal. Rabbi Shmuel disagrees. Omer, Eino tzara. I don't need the drush of nefesh meis to exclude behema. As far as the tuma, these are tumas Nazir. Shareu Omer al nefesh lo yavo. And what does lo yavo mean? Lo yavo means what's called tumas oel. Whenever the Torah speaks about oel and the tumah of an oel, it says kol haba ela oel, and lo yavo here is a reference to tumas oel. Now, a dead animal is not metame, with all due respect, to in an oil. Shebin afashos hamatamas bebia hakosim metaber, and that's only a human being, and therefore tumas mes is contracted through oil of a human being, of a human corpse, but not through a behemoth. In fact, in tumas behema of nevela, we only have tumas maga. We don't have tumas oil. Okay, now the Brisa continues. The pasuk says in the parsha of Nazir. Just 1 second. Let me just make sure I'm right here. Right. In the parsha of Nazir, it says that li'aviv li'imo li'achiv lechoso lo'yitama b'hem b'mosam. And if you recall, we said that the extra word v'mosam was going to teach us Rebbe's halach as far as the heter and saras and ziva. But now the Bryce wants to darshan the words li'aviv ule'imo. Now I'm not sure why the Bryce all of a sudden combines aviv and imo together. L'chora, each word needs its own drasha. That I can't figure out. Anyway, li'aviv ule'imo eno metame. Avol metame hu lemes mitzvah. So not only is a Kohen Gadol permitted to be mitami to mes mitzvah, even a Nazir is permitted to be mitami lemes mitzvah. Now here we have a very interesting shaila that comes up. What about a Nazir who becomes a Kohen Gadol, or a Kohen Gadol who becomes a Nazir, and he has both kiddushos? Is he allowed to be mitami to a mes mitzvah? And then we have other issues, like for example, what happens if there are no relatives to be metapel with this mess, but maybe there are other people out there who could be metapel with the mess? Okay, so now let's just summarize here. We know that with regard to Nazir, the Torah says, Al nefesh meis lo yavo. I'll call nafshos meis lo yavo. And we know that only refers to nefesh adam. And then when the Torah mentions aviv imo achiv achoso, that he's enjoyed from being metamitem, these are all superfluous, because it already says, I'll call nefashos mes lo yovo. And right now we're darshaning over the imo to teach me there's a heter for tumas mes. Brisa continues. Ad shelo yomar. The Torah didn't have to say over the imo. Yeshli, why don't I derive from Kohen Gadol? Bedin with the kavachom. Ma Kohen Gadol shekdushas lekdushas olam. Kohen Gadol is kadosh forever, for his entire life. And yet the Torah says mitami lemes mitzvah is nazir shein kedushas or kedushas olam eino din shemitami lemes mitzvah. So now we want to find out: is there an element in Nazirus which makes Nazirus more chomer than Kahuna, than Kohen Gadol? Lo v'marta Kohen Gadol shekein eino maybe korban al tumasa. If a Kohen Gadol contracts tum, he doesn't have any chiyuv karbanos. Tomar ben Nazir is even more chomer because the Torah says that may be korban al tumaso, and therefore, once we have this chumrah in Nazir of maybe korban al tumaso is hoil, who maybe korban al tumaso lo yitamel bes mitzvah, I might think therefore he's more chomer than a Kohen Gadol, and even though we already derive from Aviv that a Kohen Gadol is permitted to be yitamel bes mitzvah, not so in the case of Nazir. Tamalom li avilim lo yitama aval yitamel bes mitzvah. Once again, we are combining for some reason, I don't know why, Aviv ve'imo. Brisa continues. Oh, wait a minute. How do you know that the two words of Aviv ve'imo are teaching me a heter from Es Mitzvah and a Mitami Love ve'imo? Maybe it's Habal Tami L'Shar Mesim. Maybe the Torah is telling me that amongst the relatives, a Nazir is allowed to be Mitame, but, I'm sorry, Aviv ve'imo is representative of the relatives to whom he's not allowed to be Mitame. Avol Yitame L'Shar Mesim. Wow. This means that a Nazir is also sanctified with the Kedusha of Shechina, and therefore, in the case, just 1 second, just 1 second, what will be the Havamina of these Mitame L'Shar Krovim? Also, the pasuk says, "I'll call nefashos meslo yovo." Oh, right, yeah. So again, it's that concept of avelus and tsar. So in the case of krovim, there's avelus and tsar on the highest degree, and that's antithetical to Nazil Hashem. Again, Nazil Hashem is also, Nazil Hashem is also some sort of Kedushas Kahuna, so to speak, a Kedusha of Shechina. But on Rechokim, he's not in a state of tsar, and that's not antithetical to his Kedushas Nazirus. Is Amrit Kal V'chomer. Uma koin hedjot shemitami lekrovin, eno mitami l'shar mesim. Is Nazir sheino mitami lekrovim, eno din shlo yitami l'shar mesim. We cannot be more makil in the case of Nazir than we can in the case of a koin hedjot, and a koin hedjot is enjoined from tuma l'shar mesim. Okay, so now we're going to turn to the next Omer.